Continuing on, this is the frame where we left off, and we're making a cube that we're going to turn into a bed. So you want to add that vertical line on the left side to finish the side of your cube. And again, notice that it ends before it gets to that back wall. We don't want furniture disappearing into our walls or floating off the floor, and those are things that can happen when you put your corners of your cubes in the wrong place, make them go too far. So be careful with that placement. Next step, you're going to draw the top of the bed. We're going to complete our cube by adding a horizontal line to the top of it. So make sure it's parallel to that front rectangle. Now we're going to cut out the front of our bed frame in order to create some legs. So all we're doing is we're going to add this smaller rectangle, and it's attached down to the bottom of the rectangle we already had. You can see we leave a little bit of space at the top there, and now we're starting to see legs as they extend down. So make that rectangle inside, and then you're going to see a couple other things that we're adding in, a couple of perspective lines or guidelines. And you can see in red we have one coming off the bottom of the right leg there on the bed, and that's going to our vanishing point, even though it's kind of disappearing behind most of our bed. And then on the left side we have another perspective line, kind of about halfway, a little bit more than halfway from top to bottom there on the side of our front rectangle on the bed. And that's how we're going to divide that up to make some legs on the left side. So now go ahead and draw those vertical lines to define the legs. You're going to see them on the left side. We've added two vertical lines, and we've erased our guideline on that side of our bed. And then we've added the inside of our leg on that right leg. And then a little bit at the bottom, we can see where that foot of the base of our leg is on the right side there. And then you're going to erase those guidelines that you don't need. Right? Now it looks like we have a platform bed sitting up on those legs. And now you can draw a pillow. Free-form drawing, right? We don't need to use a ruler. Just kind of a nice round edge pillow that sits at the head of our bed to describe what that is a little bit better. Now we're going to make a window on the right wall. And we're going to start with a vertical line. You want to kind of push it to the right side because we're going to be drawing, most of the window is going to be drawn to the left of that line. So just draw a nice vertical line parallel to the edge of the right side of your paper. You're going to use perspective lines to make the shape, the top and bottom of our window. And so those are going to come right off the top and bottom of that vertical line that you just drew. And now we're going to add another line, a vertical line to the left side to complete the shape of our window. The window kind of sits on the wall, so it doesn't really have dimension to it, but it does use perspective. It needs to look like it's going back into space, like the other elements, the other things that we have in our room. And you want to erase those guidelines, perspective lines that you don't need. And now we're going to make our cross frame inside the window. And we need to use another perspective line for that, the one that goes from right to left. And then you're just going to add a vertical line for the actual cross in the middle. And that defines most of our window. But we're going to add one more thing to make it look a little bit more finished. And that's a frame. So go ahead and draw a frame. You're going to use perspective lines at the top and bottom, and then just vertical lines on the right and left side, just like we did with the mirror on the left side of the room. Now we're going to do something that gets a little bit trickier. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add a floor design. And we're going to be using our perspective lines, and we're going to be using our vanishing point. And what we need to do is we need to create these dots that you're seeing on the bottom of our back wall there. We're going to add these dots in, and that's going to tell us how to space out these floorboards that we're going to be adding in. So you just kind of put dots evenly spaced, and notice that they do continue over onto the pillow, the top portion of our bed frame. And the reason for that is because we need floor. The floor is going to continue underneath the bed on that in that bottom right corner. And those are going to be guidelines, even though we're not drawing the lines on the bed. I mean, we can as guidelines, but we're not going to be drawing them on the bed, but they're going to need to be seen underneath the bed. Okay, so just draw evenly spaced points where that back wall meets the floor. And now we're going to be drawing in these perspective lines. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up each point with the vanishing point with your ruler, and then you're going to draw a line. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to move it, you're going to rotate it like the vanishing point, it's an axis. And if you think of it like the axis on a clock, right, where all those dials are moving around, that's how we're going to rotate the ruler to make our lines. So get your ruler lined up with the vanishing point and one of the dots on the bottom of that back wall line, and then draw your first line. Rotate it again, draw your next line, rotate it again, draw your next line, and so on until you go all the way underneath the bed on the right corner, right? Think of it like the hands of a clock as you rotate around. Okay, if you're just drawing random diagonal lines, that's not it. If you're just drawing straight up and down lines, it's not going to look like it's going back into space. It's not using perspective. So you have to rotate off that vanishing point. Very important. Now we're going to add in some horizontal lines to create the rest of our design. And we have two variations on this. And one is going to be floor tiles, square floor tiles. So you're just adding in horizontal lines, but similar to what we did on the sidewalk for our cityscape, you're going to be adding these lines in, and you're going to be making them closer together as they move away from us. And that's going to help add to this illusion of depth. So your first line is going to be away from your bottom edge of your paper, right? The next one's going to be a little bit closer. The next one's going to be a little bit closer, closer, and so on until you get to that back wall. That's really an important part of creating depth. So go ahead and add those lines in now. Now the other option, you can do a wood floor. Instead of the tiles, you can make a wood floor. And this is kind of that idea of wooden floorboards. So the only difference here, you've drawn those lines across, right, all the way across, and that made a tile pattern of squares. And all we need to do then is erase the in-betweens. Every other one you erase, and that extends those boards out in kind of an alternating way. So it begins to look like wooden floorboards. So you can leave it and call it a tile floor pattern, or you can erase every other line and you'll have a wooden floor pattern. Just make sure, again, those are parallel to the edge of your paper. You don't want a bunch of askewed, strange diagonal lines, or it's just going to look like chaos. They need to be nice parallel lines. Now, there are times when you're going to need to draw a circle on a wall, but you're going to need perspective. So what you want to do is a circular light fixture on the ceiling. You're going to start with your vanishing point and your lines side and your two perspective lines off of your vanishing point. And they should be vanishing point, right? It's in the center of the room, so they should be where those perspective lines land at the top of your paper. So try and measure that visually, or you can do it with your ruler if you want. And you're going to two horizontal lines in. And how far those are apart? They shouldn't be really far apart because we're trying to squeeze our circle and make it look like it's in perspective. So you're basically making a box. And when you add your circle in, it's going to be squeezed. And that's called an ellipse. So we're using a thing called an ellipse to create this illusion of depth in space. When you turn that circle sideways, right, it gets squeezed and it looks like this on the ceiling. You can make an area rug, right? Instead of a big circle, which is going to look flat, you're going to make the area rug, you're going to make it squeezed a little bit from top to bottom, and it's going to look like it's going back into space. Same thing with a clock on the wall. Let's say you add a round clock, you can do the same process. It's just going to be, you're going to be using vertical lines instead of horizontal lines to squeeze that circle. Okay, so that's a way to create circles within your space. So that's it for how to add furniture to your room in perspective. We added a window, we added a circle, a light fixture, and then you can add other accessories to make your room look more realistic. We've added some picture frames here on the dresser. There is a clock on the wall, which is, you'll notice it is squeezed a little bit to make it look like it's in perspective. We have a doorway in the back and a work of art on that back wall as well. Okay, so this gives you an idea. Now this is very simple. What you're going to do for your room perspective project is going to be much more complex. But this is a good start to get you thinking about how furniture works in a room and how you're going to be creating that idea of space. So I want you to turn in, you're going to upload your drawings that you just did for our step-by-step, turn that in for a score, and then you're going to move on to, I have another PowerPoint which actually talks about the room perspective drawing in kind of a general way. And then we'll talk specifically about instructions for the project next class. Okay, so turn in your step-by-step drawings and then move on to the room perspective drawing PowerPoint that I'm uploading as well. Okay?